Welcome to WYCD Wicked, that stands for What You Can Do. Your old pal Jake, and there are a lot of ups and downs today, but stuff that we can take advantage of on the left regardless. We've got the GOP schism on full display, which I am humorously calling the Great White Schism. However, as a white man on the left myself, I do want to clarify the actual schism is between people who believe in following facts and the GOP. But amongst the GOP, there are folks who are fighting, and that is good. Having to do with that, Fox appears to have done a soft ban on Donald Trump. They don't want to talk about him. Shocking. Shocking that they would not want to talk about the person for whom which talking about has got them a $1.6 billion lawsuit to deal with. That is a true shock, he said, dripping with sarcasm. And then the Cop City protests. I said I wasn't going to heckle the left anymore. And you know what? I'm not. But I do have some suggestions to help. I think what the folks are doing in the forests of Atlanta right now is heroic. I think it is necessary. And I think that it could be even more effective than it currently is. One thing it has succeeded in doing, credit where it's due, is getting eyeballs. There we are. Is getting eyeballs on this problem, which is that there is a massive police facility that it's funded by corporations, 80% funded by corporations, and it is geared up to assault minorities. And of course, after a protest got out of hand yesterday, of course, the leadership is lying about it, as they tend to do. So we're going to look at all of that, and I will, of course, tell you what you can do about it. Let's jump right into it. I want to enjoy some Schadenfreude. Let's watch the GOP schism on full display. Here is the good old-fashioned corporate media, but as represented by the best of them, MSNBC, talking about it.
New tonight, Donald Trump wrapping up his speech at the Conservative Political Action Conference just a short time ago. We're going to do you a favor. We are not going to show you any sound bites from his speech because it was just as dissociated from the real world as all of his recent speeches. But we can report that the CPAC crowd loved it, and he won the conference's straw poll. And that's only notable because Trump was about the only person at the conference this week who enjoyed such a warm reception. Hardly anyone showed up to Nikki Haley's address. See it there on your screen. You could practically hear crickets when Mike Pompeo decided to speak. But Republicans, well, they came out in force for Trump tonight. As Charlie Sykes wrote for MSNBC.
Oh, let's just go back and enjoy that a little bit more. Ooh, look at that. Yeah, it's not exactly what I would call a overwhelming movement at the moment. Good Lord.
But Republicans, well, they came out in force for Trump tonight. As Charlie Sykes wrote for MSNBC.com this week, during the Trump era, CPAC evolved from a gathering of Republican Spitfires and alt-right oddballs to a straight-up MAGA cult. Don't forget, 2 years ago, there was a golden Trump statue at the conference. Some on the right are saying the conference should be named TPAC because it caters to one man and one man alone. Look at all the big Republican names not attending this year's conference. Of course, the biggest name, Ron DeSantis. You also have Mike Pence, Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel. The only attendees appear to be former Trump officials or...
Hold on. I don't know that Ron DeSantis is really the biggest name. A lot of the support for him is AstroTurf, and we're going to get into that in a moment. Why that's important, where that AstroTurf is being supplied. But I don't necessarily agree with the idea that it's a big deal that Ron DeSantis didn't go there. Also, remember, Ron DeSantis recently kicked out a bunch of Trump supporters from an event he was at. He had mall security kick him out. He doesn't have friends at CPAC at the moment, and I'm going to assume that his poor showing isn't going to bode well for him in the primaries. It does. As I say that, though, I realize Trump may very well be in prison. 2024, in terms of an election, is a long way off. It's really weird, in fact, that we run elections basically for half of our lives in America. Half of our lives are election season. There are countries, this is not a joke, there are countries where your campaigning is limited to a couple of weeks before Election Day. That might even be too little, but there are other countries where your campaigning is limited to a couple of months within Election Day. I, honest to God, think that is what we should do in this country. We should insist. We could just do it through a small change. We could say you cannot spend at all from your massive stockpile of whatever until 1 year until the Election Day. That, I think, would be more reasonable, for God's sake.
Trump fanatics, like conspiracy theorist Carrie Lake, conspiracy theorist Mike Lindell, conspiracy theorist Marjorie Taylor Greene. Not even Fox is safe, folks. Former Trump strategist Steve Bannon was met with a standing ovation when he effectively declared war on Rupert Murdoch and his empire, vowing to destroy the network for turning its back on Trump. Now, we have to acknowledge
something else before we move on to Matt Schlapp's sexual assault, or sexual assaulting of somebody else. He's a creep. But it's important to note, Steve Bannon was pardoned during Trump's last day in office. Steve Bannon was pardoned for scamming Trump supporters. Just remember the kind of folks we're dealing with.
One elephant in the room at CPAC, and that is its chief organizer, Matt Schlapp. He is facing a $9.4 million sexual assault lawsuit from a former staffer for failed Senate candidate Herschel Walker. Schlapp has vigorously denied the assault allegations. The headline should be the lead of all CPAC-related coverage this week, but it has become almost a footnote because the conference is so mirrored in chaos and infighting and, of course, Trump love. Joining me now is the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington. Congresswoman, thank you so much for coming back on the show. You know, much has been made of the conspicuous absences that we're seeing on this week's CPAC guest list. Some are calling it evidence of a split between the extremists on one side and the so-called normies in the GOP, which I don't think there are any. Do you think that is the right framing, or what is your understanding as to why we're seeing CPAC become what it has become?
Well, Eamon, it's so good to see you. Thanks for having me back on. I think that Republicans are in a massive identity crisis. They are in disarray. They are in ruin. And the problem for Republicans is that these conspiracy theorists.
Hold on. I just want to say, I think she's having a little bit of fun there. It is so common around the election season to hear people say Democrats in disarray on corporate media. That's like a phrase that they love to do. This is actual disarray. This is an actual schism we're seeing form. It has been predicted by your old pal Jake and other more prescient minds before. And I mean, I love to see it, but I think she's having a bit of fun turning that old annoying phrase on its head.
These people who have who are leaders of CPAC, sexual assault lawsuit against the CEO of it. And the things that are being said at CPAC are so extreme that not even Republican leaders want to go to it. The problem, of course, is that Trump is still very popular there, and Trump still commands a significant percentage of the Republican base. So I'm not sure how they're going to resolve this crisis, because clearly they understand that Trump and the extreme Republicans put the Republican brand at risk. That's why so many are staying away. But on the other hand, Trump is the Republican brand. And that is a problem for them. That's why they lost so many races, including Herschel Walker, including so many across the country, because Trump insisted on these extreme MAGA candidates. And the people that showed up are the ones who are still willing to embrace that one-man cult.
Can you talk to me about the danger of this identity crisis for a moment? Because we look at some crazy oddball Republicans on a state level doing things, whether it be in Florida or Texas. You're talking about the identity crisis that's at play here with CPAC all under the control of Trump and the conspiracy theorists. But
Catherine Wolfe, left is indeed best. Heck yes. I want to chime in. Oh, I'm sorry there, Eamon. I want to chime in. There's no danger. There's no danger in the Republicans not being unified. All the evil things that they are trying to do now, they were trying to do before as well, just with more subtlety. And by subtlety, I really just mean a wall of confusion. If you take, for example, their Social Security, a tax, their attempts to get rid of it, we can say back and forth between us, yeah, they're trying to cut Social Security, because people had to do the work of deciphering what they meant by entitlement reforms, what they meant by all the rhetoric they used, which ended up just being a bunch of lies. But the point is, what would the effect of that have been if they were successful in let's say, one of their plans, raising the age of Social Security? Well, that would mean a bunch of 65-year-olds would have to work until they were 70. A lot of whom wouldn't be able to, because by the time you're 65, the odds that you've acquired a health problem that prevents you from doing the job that you did when you were 30 is pretty decent. It's realistic to take that into account. So they would have put a bunch of people out on the street. I will grant this to Eamon, though, who's, by the way, a wonderful young buck out there reading the news. I like him. But I'll give him this as well. There are more direct calls. More direct calls. Not that there weren't any before, but there are more direct calls for straight-up domestic terrorism from MAGA. So I'll give him that. There is danger, literal danger there.
Under the control of Trump and the conspiracy theorists. But how dangerous is it for the Republican Party, for this country, for them to be continuing down this road?
It's extremely dangerous, and that's why I don't really, I don't smile when I talk about this, because it is not a good situation when such a significant stage has been given to conspiracy theorists, to right-wing extremists, to people who spread disinformation, fear, all kinds of things that do real violence. I was listening to the segment that you just had with the attorney generals, and I once again want to just be clear that the kind of violence that Donald Trump unleashed on the country during his term as president, leading up to January 6th, and continuing with events at people's homes, as I saw myself with a gunman at my house, this kind of violence is all directly linked to this hate, this disinformation, these conspiracy theorists, not to mention that the threat of our democracy being ignored, being taken over by these conspiracy theorists, people who don't want to respect the fair and free results of an election. That is a very serious country. And these people still have a huge platform out there with, even though Republicans,
Okay, so just to highlight what I was talking about before, about the same things being done in the past, just with more subtlety. Let's talk about respect. Again, I'm not disagreeing with her. I think she's correct. I just want to make the scale of the problem clear and the villains in this story also quite clear. Because the old school Republicans aren't good guys. MAGA needs to be full-on stopped, like handcuffs stopped. The MAGA is a domestic terrorist organization, in my opinion. And I don't say that as a exaggeration. I mean, they are literally, in my opinion, an organization for domestic terrorists. But let's not also forget that in 2000, the whole election, the presidency, came down to Florida. Who intervened on behalf of George W. Bush? Jeb Bush, his brother. We allowed that to happen because we were too respectful. We were too respectful of the opposition. We allowed the narrative about Republicans to exist, that they were equal in some way. They were as legitimate in some way as the Democratic Party. No, they weren't. At the time, they were under a consent decree that prevented them, a court order, in other words, that prevented them from having poll watchers at the polls. Why was that? Well, because they had sent armed thugs to intimidate people at the polls. And they were given the choice. Either you agree to stop having any presence at all at polls because you cannot be trusted, Republican Party. You cannot be trusted to do this like the Democrats can because they are a legitimate political organization. So either you agree to do that or we're going to court or this is going to be a massive embarrassment for you, and you know how it's going to be found because you ordered armed thugs to be at the polls. That is the decree they were under at the time. Only got lifted in 2018, and it shouldn't have been, for the record. That was the court order they were under, and we treated them like they were a normal political party. They did some corrupt things in Florida by having Jeb Bush say, nope, my brother won Florida. We did not fight that. We could have kept fighting. And I say we, I mean decent Americans, Democrats at the time. Democrats did not fight that. And later, when the state was independently recounted, guess who it turns out got the majority of the votes in that state? It was Al Gore. In other words, when 9/11 happened, Al Gore should have been president. When we went to war for 20 years because George W. Bush lied about it, Al Gore should have been in that place instead. And we would not have gone to war for 20 years because, as far as we can tell, he does not lie about these things because he's like a normal human being that doesn't commit crimes like it's nothing. He cares a lot about environmental concerns. He cares a lot about global warming, Al Gore does. George W. Bush didn't. He loosened EPA regulations. We would have had Al Gore in office instead of George W. Bush. We would have been less screwed than we are now. I wouldn't have watched a home fall into Lake Michigan if Al Gore had been president. And on and on and on. George W. Bush stopped us from calling white domestic extremists terrorists, even when they were doing terrorism things. It goes on. I'm just saying, be wary of the other side of this schism. Although, again, I want to say I don't disagree with anything Jayapal is saying here.
Republicans stayed away from CPAC. They're not denouncing CPAC. They're not denouncing Trump or these ideas in the way that they should. And so this continues to be a massive problem for our democracy and for basic civility in our country.
I want to ask you, if I can, switching for a moment gears here, about the pandemic-era expansion of food assistance funding of SNAP benefits, which expired this week, something that was just so crucial and served as a lifeline during the pandemic. How dire is this situation? You're the chair of the Progressive Caucus. This is obviously something that you championed, and I think a lot of people, progressives on the left, championed.
This is dire. And I just want to make clear for anyone who's listening, SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. This is the money that gets food to people who are hungry. And what we saw during the pandemic is by extending SNAP benefits, by adding the child tax credit, we were able to cut child poverty, in half. And it made it clear, Eamon, that poverty is a policy choice. Hunger is a policy choice. We have the power to change it, and it's with very little money. I mean, we're talking about just in my state of Washington, 500,000 people will lose $171 a month. Across the country, 32 million people are going to be pushed onto this hunger cliff.
Hold on. Think about that for a moment. I don't know how tight your budget is at home, but to me, having groceries suddenly become more expensive, which is what she's saying here, more expensive by $171 would be devastating. And I'm not on SNAP. So imagine that you have the kind of money in your bank account where you require assistance to pay for food, to feed your family. I have the benefit of being a childless crone. So imagine I had a couple of little scamps to feed. And suddenly I have to pay an additional $171 out of my budget. Some of us would be skipping meals. I don't like that when I imagine it for me. So I don't like it when I imagine it for her constituents. I don't like it when I imagine it for any human being. If you require SNAP, I mean, it's just insane to me that we would allow this to happen. I hope that you will contact your representatives regarding SNAP benefits and tell them that there is, of course, a link to contact your representatives in the descriptions. Is there? I'm going to make sure there is. But contact your representative and make sure they are aware that you don't want SNAP benefits cut and you want them speaking out against it.
And we know that hunger is already so much worse than it was even pre-pandemic. So this is a horrific thing. Republicans, by the way, in the House are proposing cutting SNAP even further, supposedly to take care of the deficit, when we know that we could raise taxes, as President Biden has proposed, on the wealthiest billionaires and get in enormous amounts of money that would far outweigh anything we would get by cutting these essential benefits to families.
Let me get your thoughts as well on this Texas lawsuit that could determine the fate of medication abortion access nationwide. You have this judge, Trump appointee. He has a history of siding with conservatives on this issue. What is at stake? How could this affect your constituents? And how does this country fight it?
Well, this was a clear case of forum shopping, looking for a judge, a Trump-appointed judge, who would give a ruling that would essentially overturn the FDA's ruling that medication abortion is safe. It has been safe for 20 years. It's been used around the world. And I just want you to think, Eamon, and anybody who's listening, about the implications not only for this medication abortion, but also for any medication that the FDA has approved, that any judge could suddenly decide to overturn it. Now, the consequences also for women across this country, pregnant people across this country who are trying to get abortions, is dire. And this, this will, of course, affect the people of color, the poorest people who can't afford to travel across state lines. This is going to affect even states like mine, where we have legalized abortion and protected it, but this is going to have a massive effect across the country. It will be a terrible ruling, not only for abortion and women's freedoms, but also for all medication.
No disagreements there. Oh, I see what I've done. No disagreements there. The cuts, the ridiculous attack on medication abortion, of course, is insane. The whole interview is linked in the description. That's Camilla Jayapal. I gotta tell you, anytime she's on TV, I recommend listening to what she has to say. She is a sharp lady. But what can you do about this schism? This schism in the GOP? Couple of things. Number one, vote in primaries. They're coming up. There is a schism. We are anticipating that one of the effects of this is going to be people leaving the GOP. Where are they going to go? They're going to go to the Democrats. That means we're going to have right-leaning forces dragging Democrats to the right. We need to make sure there are forces pulling the other way. So I guess I should do it like this. Dragging Democrats to the right, we got to have forces pulling the other way, pulling them to the left. Easily accomplished. Vote in primaries. It's that simple. Go as far left as you can. As far as SNAP benefits, which I also feel is important, contact your representative. I've updated the description now. If you refresh the page, it should show up. Contact them and simply say, I want you to expand SNAP benefits. Don't shrink them, expand them. Don't cut this additional 170, yada, yada, yada. I want you to restore all of that funding because hungry people in America shouldn't exist. We have enough wheat. We have enough cows. Sorry, old fella. We have enough food. Let us feed the hungry. It's that simple. It doesn't matter what party you're in. If you're a Republican, I presume you're obsessed with Jesus, and good for you. I'm glad you enjoy that. Jesus would have fed the hungry. You can do it. You don't have to do a miracle. All you have to do is contact your representative. You don't got to create fish. You got to write an email. So write the email. All right. Well, I love me some Beau of the Fifth Column, and he had a little bit of fun talking about the soft ban on Fox News. I do want to say we're at 8 likes. If we get, and I'm going to be a little gutsy here, if we get to a whopping 10 likes, if we can get 2 more likes, I am going to do the entire breakdown of Trump's crimes, as I did in a 2-hour stream before, but I have narrowed it down to a much more abridged summary. I will read that entire thing to you if we can get to 10 likes. So please slam that like button. I'm going to read a couple of quick viewer comments from Catherine and Laura. Catherine says, left is best, my friends. Yes, indeed. Laura says, Jesus did feed the hungry. Yes, he did. Good on him, too. Seems like a guy I would have gotten along with. Everybody would have gotten it. Who wouldn't get along with Jesus? There's a reason we divide these up sometimes. Anyway, the point is, Beau of the Fifth Column talked about the recent Fox Trump ban, and it is just hilarious. Let us have a look at what he had to say.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Beau again. So today we are going to talk about a conspicuous absence on Fox News and why it might be happening. A very prominent figure on the Republican side of the aisle hasn't really been around, and there are now indications of at least what people in his orbit believe is the reason. If you don't know, Trump hasn't been on Fox News since September, when he was on with Hannity. The reporting now has a quote from somebody close to Trump. Everybody knows that there's this soft ban or silent ban. It certainly, however you want to say it, quiet ban, soft ban, whatever it is indicative of how the Murdochs feel about Trump in this particular moment. Now, a bunch of news agencies have reached out to Fox for comments, and they haven't gotten any, at least not at time of filming. The suggestion that Trump has been placed on a do not let him on the air list is, it's not unbelievable. It's not something that's out of the realm of possibility. Given Fox's current situation with the depositions and all the cases that are going on, they might be trying to limit liability.
Let's not forget as well, that they were astroturfing Ron DeSantis. All of this MAGA nonsense has, believe it or not been great for Fox. Because, yeah, you know what? They raked in tons of money supporting Trump. Can't be denied. They also, during this time, saw the creation of multiple competitors where before they had nothing. Before, if you were right-wing, there was Fox and nothing else. Organization after organization, Newsmax, OAN, yada, 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 is cropping up because they see what Fox does. They see, one, it's easy. Two, it's lucrative. So they were already astroturfing Ron DeSantis. They don't want, as in the bean counters, I suppose, don't want Trump to be the guy. It's also worth noting that, like everybody else who is aware of the facts, which Fox is, even though they don't repeat the facts ever, like everybody else who's aware of the facts, Fox is sitting here wondering, is Trump going to be in prison in 1 month? Having some separation. I mean, obviously, he's not going to be in prison in 1 month, but they're sitting here wondering, is Trump going to be indicted? They're having some separation between themselves and Trump for a ton of reasons, but it all falls under the umbrella of the guy is irresponsible and he does not play ball.
The former president coming on at a time when he continues to echo the claims about the election and all of that stuff is probably not exposure that Fox wants right now. So while there is no confirmation of this beyond what appears to be a suspicion from within the Trump circle, it's not as far-fetched as it might seem. A lot of the things that come out from Team Trump are less than reliable. But this seems plausible. If I was running stuff at Fox, I don't think that I would want the former president on, especially not right now. But also given the fact that it does appear that Murdoch is looking for another candidate to back and raising the profile of Trump's opposition in the primary.
Oh, yes.
It really does seem to track. There are candidates that are just low-level, long shot, no, they're not going to make it, that are getting time on Fox. But Trump, no, he's nowhere to be found.
One reason I believe that there are multiple candidates appearing on Fox. Of course, there is the fact that Fox is still pretending to be news, and a lot of folks are aware of the fact that you have to, if you interview one candidate, you're kind of obligated to interview all candidates. So if they're interviewing a candidate in the Republican primary, off you go. You got a lot of folks. But it also, if Trump dwindles away, it also will make it seem like Ron DeSantis beat somebody instead of Ron DeSantis was appointed by the media, if there's multiple other names. If all that happens is Ron DeSantis gets the nomination because Trump is too busy in court, that's not going to help him out a whole lot.
So
he'll look weak.
With a lot of the upstart right-wing news outlets losing viewership and losing deals to get into homes, Trump's lack of presence on Fox, that might be something that truly hinders his ability to move forward with his desire to return to the White House. Given everything that we're seeing and the lack of support coming from high-ranking members and big funders, Trump is becoming more and more relegated to a position where his rhetoric influences the base that then influences policymakers. The odds of him holding a position again seem to be ever decreasing. So, anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.
What he said at the end there regarding donors not supporting Trump. Donors see the same thing everybody else sees. The only issue is they didn't care about, Muslim bans. They don't care about transgender people getting killed. They don't care about police brutality. They care about not having to pay taxes. That's what they care about. The problem they now see with Trump is not his rhetoric. It's the fact that he is literally in danger of ruining the democracy. He's in danger of, they don't even really care about the democracy, but they care about stability. He literally did such a bad job as president that it put them in danger. It puts their finances in danger. His COVID misinformation made the problems we had so much worse. His treatment of Ukraine, which, God help me, if I see lefties talking bad about Ukraine, I swear to God, his treatment of Ukraine was such that it encouraged Russia to invade, that, again, hit their finances. And it's going to keep happening, and they know this. So, yeah, he's lost truly his biggest supporters, which were the corporations. This can't go better for us, and let me stress that it is a golden opportunity for us to deprogram some cultists. If there are MAGA people in your community, simply ask them if they heard what Tucker Carlson said about him. Did they hear what Rupert Murdoch said about him? Did they hear what Sean Hannity said about him? Because all those guys said some disrespectful things, correct, but disrespectful things about their watchers, about their viewers. But they're not able to talk about it because of corporate policy, which is smart because they are being sued about it right now. You shouldn't talk about it on air. They're not allowed to talk about it, which means they're not allowed to give disinformation. Take advantage of that to find out the answer. If they want to hear from somebody else, or if they want to hear what their beloved anchors said about them, they're going to have to watch real news. And that is where you are going to be able to chip away at the madness they've surrounded themselves with. Ooh, look at that. 12 likes. I love it. I'm delighted. Let's have a look at some of these comments. Andrew Then says left is best. Absolutely. Jesus didn't charge. Ooh, I like that. Thanks for covering Cop City and Atlanta forest defenders who fed homeless until Kemp's terrorist publicity stunt. Tables of food are now set up at every tent. Cop Cam proves Tortuguita was murdered. Oh, I'm sorry. I've been seeing the nickname Tort. Cop Cam proves Tortuguita was murdered. You know what? Let's dive right into that. I'm really curious. Cop City plus Atlantis fed homeless until... Yeah, I'm really curious to delve into this a little more. I have suggestions for helping. But honestly, I'm going to be curious to hear what you guys have to say about this. This is the most recent development from Cop City. Things got a little bit wild recently. Here it is.
This surveillance camera footage shows police officers in Georgia trying to secure a chain-link fence as what appear to be fireworks explode around them. Across the roadway, dozens of masked protesters hurled rocks and pyrotechnics toward the police. This was the scene Sunday night in a forested area outside Atlanta, which marked the most violent showdown yet between environmental activists.
Okay. Thing number one that I want to make clear. Cop City should not be there. We should collectively work to get rid of it. We should pressure Atlanta. We should pressure Georgia. We should pressure anyone we think we can through emails, through protests, etc., to get it gone. The protesters up there are wearing masks, most likely, I assume, because they don't want to get found out and charged. But think about what that is going to do. Plain and simple, take your emotion out of it. Be cold and efficient. An image of a bunch of folks wearing masks, throwing explosive devices. I realize they're fireworks. But throwing explosive devices at police. What is that going to do? Is that going to make it more likely or less likely that Cop City is built? My instinct is to say that makes it more likely because, yeah, this is going to get a lot of media attention, which you would think, yeah, that's good. But it's a lot of media attention where the protesters look like, oh, they're scary, they got to be dealt with. I'm not sure if that was the right move. That said, these people have been pushed pretty GD far. We had our commenter, Jesus Didn't Charge, he mentioned Tortuguita. Who was that? It was a guy that was, in my opinion, murdered by the police. Murdered. Police have been, according to people who are there, police have been hunting through the woods, weapons drawn, looking for protesters. Of course, we're not going to get that footage played for MSNBC because it's not going to be given, or this was Reuters. Played for Reuters because it was not given to Reuters by the cops, because why would they do that? No, they will give only this kind of image. Just be cautious of the tricks they will use, because they will keep using the dirtiest tactics. And we're about to see, oh gosh, police leadership talking about this very thing and lying. Just lying.
Activists and law enforcement over the construction of a police training facility. Protesters set fire to equipment. Police said they'd made 35 arrests. Atlanta Police Chief Darren Shearbaum.
Attack law enforcement officers. You damage equipment. You are breaking the law. And this was a very violent attack that occurred in the city. Very violent attack. This wasn't about a public safety training center. This was about anarchy, and this was about the.
We're gonna keep his quote there for a second, and I'm gonna leave my little box behind. Just go up here. He says this wasn't about a training center. This was about anarchy. Do you think that those people were there at that police training center saying, we need anarchy? No. They were being clear they want the police training center gone. When he randomly says, this wasn't about a police training center, this was about anarchy, you're supposed to just dismiss, the casual listener is supposed to just dismiss everything the protests are saying on this doughy, overexposed fool's word. It was about a police training center. And the fact that he feels he has to lie about it, he can't just say protesters threw rocks, and I didn't see rocks for the record. I saw the explosive devices, though. Protesters threw rocks and fireworks at us. If he could just say that, I would be more inclined to believe him. But he doesn't. He lies about their motivations. He mischaracterizes them. That should alarm you. You should not be comfortable with police doing that and doing it so blatantly. And it should inform you about who's the bad guy here. Interestingly, the protesters advertise where you can walk up and meet them. They have a website, the protesters do, called Stop Cop City. By the way, head over there. You can find out how to support them. I've also got a link in the description, which links to all the ways they ask that you support them. I recommend that you do. But Reuters did not get in contact with them. They didn't ask them for their side. Reuters does it's a good news organization. I am not saying that this is necessarily even a fault of Reuters. They might not have had the infrastructure to do that. But bear in mind, we're not hearing from the protesters, and we could have, and that is a concern.
Them to destabilize.
The site of the planned Atlanta Public Safety Training Center, derisively called Cop City by opponents, has been the scene of escalating confrontations both in the woods and in the city. Demonstrators oppose both the increasing militarization of police and the building of the site in a forest that its defenders call, quote, the lungs of Atlanta. Demonstrations ramped up in January after police killed an environmental activist who went by the name Tortuguita during a raid to clear the construction site. Their name and face became a symbol of the resistance. Protesters that month marched in Atlanta, and some attacked buildings, set fire to a police car, and were arrested. Reuters photographer Alyssa Pointer has been covering the Cop City demonstrations. She was at a nonviolent gathering on Saturday where she saw the issue unite environmental activists with those calling for police reform.
There was a young man from...
I'm going to eat my words. They did talk to him. Thank God. All right, let's hear what they got to say. I'm not going to interrupt this.
The Dakotas who spoke, and he was from a Native American tribe, and he talked about the importance of protecting the land. And I see people who talk about we want to have justice for Rayshard Brooks, the young man that was shot and killed by police in Atlanta a couple days after the George Floyd protests started in 2020. They talked about Tortuguita, the young man that was shot and killed by police who was occupying the forest at that time. I do believe these two groups are wanting to come together to show solidarity.
Sunday's events began with a music festival that was part of a week of demonstrations against the construction, but police said events turned violent.
Wait a minute. Is that, did the protesters start that fire, or is that police doing their training nonsense?
When a group of activists they called, quote, agitators, changed into black clothing, breached the site, and launched bricks, rocks, Molotov cocktails, and fireworks at officers.
All right, so why am I so hesitant? Let me jump out here for a second. Here we go. Why am I so hesitant to believe anything the cops say? Why am I double checking and triple checking that they're getting the protesters' side? Because much of the coverage of this has been like that. Now, that was fairness where it's due. I gotta be careful about this one, because I don't want to make it seem like I'm against Reuters on it when I'm talking about the general media coverage. I'm not. Reuters did a good job. One piece of correction: Tortuguita was non-binary, so not a he, but whatever. The point being, I thought that was pretty good coverage, and what you saw was, in my opinion, not going to be an effective protest. Why is that? Not because you shouldn't be protesting this, not because there shouldn't be efforts to stop this. Absolutely. But what are you actually going to, let's say you're there, you're in the woods, you want to get Cop City gone. Somebody turns to you and says, what we're going to do, get a bunch of fireworks and throw it at them, and that'll scare the cops, and the cops will run away. Do you think you are going to outforce Atlanta cops? Seems unlikely, right? You might encourage them to get a bunch of SWAT teams to comb the woods and just start arresting anybody in the woods, left and right. That's what you might encourage them to do. Are you going to sway a bunch of people's opinions by throwing the fireworks, by throwing the rocks? Are you going to change minds around the country about whether or not that place should be there? No, you are not. Most people who see that will be like, okay, I'm on the side of the cops on this one. It's just not effective messaging, is my point. Let me counterpoint myself here. How long have they been building Cop City? Long time now. This protest has been going on for a long time. Months and months and months and months and months and months have gone by, and they're still doing the thing. So I understand where the protesters are coming from, where they're getting desperate. They're trying to change tactics. They're trying to get this thing out. I said at the top, I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. What do you think? And I've got a link in the description, by the way, which gives plenty that you can do. You can pick from. But what do you think, in your opinions, are the most effective forms of protest? I personally am of the belief that nonviolent civil disobedience, so you do get arrested, nonviolent civil disobedience is the most effective. I believe if they would have gone to those fences, those chain fences, if they would have had a pair of handcuffs, you can get them from your local sexual gratification store. Get fuzzy handcuffs if you want, and handcuffed themselves to the fence, and sat there and waited to be arrested. I think that would have done more to get Cop City gone. Why? It accomplishes something similar. Admittedly, it's not as interesting to see, but it does create an interesting visual for the news media to pick up and run with and show to people. Here's 30 folks who handcuffed themselves to a chain link fence. Now watch how they are. Now let's talk about why they handcuffed themselves to a fence. And here's what happened: they got arrested, and yada yada yada. And also, it makes them sympathetic. It makes the cops have to do the brutality, which is arresting someone. And it will make the cops look bad anytime they screw up. If they bump a protester's head into a police car as they're pushing him in, and that gets caught on camera, good. Chalk it up. That is good. That is another thing that will make them look like the bad guys and the protesters look like the good guys. And that is exactly, in my opinion, the most effective way to play this. Some of your comments. This is Atlanta, the home of MLK, and nonviolence should be the way, in my opinion. I agree. Catherine Wolf said, police say should always alert you. Also agreed. Laura says, masks partly for tear gas. Good point. Very good point. Laura also says, similar to when alt-right were disguised as Antifa, police would accuse Antifa, but were never able to arrest any in BLM protests. True. You should also need to know how many. You also need to know how many people. Franny P says how many protesters are actually from Atlanta or even Georgia. Yeah, that's a good point. It is well known that there are agitators that are planted. It sounds like kooky conspiracy stuff, folks. It happens. In fact, it has happened in Cop City. The protests. It happened in Black Lives Matter. One of the I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, one of the people who was a BLM protester that eventually did get into legal trouble, she was found to have a gun. That gun was planted on her by a police plant. And it goes beyond that. It's well known. In fact, it's on the Department of Justice website that far-right extremists often enter into police protests with the intention of agitating. That is a technique domestic terrorists use. We have to be careful about that. And we also have to make sure that the protesters themselves have a clear plan. Jesus didn't charge. Movement doesn't promote violence, but you can't get group of... Yes, here is it exactly. Movement doesn't promote violence, but you can't get a group of kids together without a few playing with firecrackers and giving cops and corporations justification for moving us towards fascism. I see what you're saying, and I agree. And I do think that is exactly what police are hoping for. They are hoping for an excuse to be cruel, to use fascist tactics, and we got to fight it. Catherine Wolf says, they have been sleeping in the trees. They were being arrested. No one heard about it until cops got brutal. Now it's on the news. True. And I think making sure that the cop brutality is on the news is the way to go, for sure. Catherine Wolf says, ACAB. I actually disagree with you there. I think that there's plenty of decent ones, and it is necessary for us to start promoting left-wingers taking up careers in law enforcement, left-wingers getting on the Department of Justice, left-wingers as prosecutors. I know, it's weird to say, but I think when we write off culturally law enforcement as a career for lefties, we are saying that we will allow our law enforcement to be done entirely by right-wingers. And that, to me, that's scary. You want to know what it looks like when we have nothing but right-wingers doing our law enforcement. It looks like the situation we have currently with Donald Trump. I said we would do the breakdown of all of his crimes, the abridged breakdown of all of his crimes. If we got to 10 likes, folks, we blew past it. So we are going to do that. I am going to take a 30-second break while I set this up. I hope you'll stay tuned, and we're going to jump right to that. Well, all right. Thank you very much for sticking around. We are now going to cover all of Trump's crimes. Going to do a quick pitch for paying me money. If you've got the extra cash, I am looking to travel around this country and interview people like the folks in Cop City. However, I require gasoline for my vehicle, and I am on an extremely limited budget, so do consider using the Super Chat function in the live stream. do consider becoming a member. Our channel does have memberships now. You can join, and that will allow you to have gifts and what have you. But the idea is to fund your old pal Jake going and talking to these people in person using a series of pieces of technology that are too large to bring on camera. All right, let's do this full breakdown. Donald Trump has been a career criminal. The man has broken the law as a real estate guy. He has broken the law as a boss, anything he has done criminally. And that was no different when he was a candidate. That was no different when he was president, God help us. And we have done nothing about it. Let's recap these crimes. A little bit ago, I did a video called All Trump's Crimes, wherein I listed all of the crimes believed to be committed by Donald Trump between 2015 and now. One viewer said they were interested in the idea, but wasn't willing to sit through a 2-hour stream. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Here they are in abridged form, but for the record, I did the work. And if you'd like to see me rant about it for 2 hours, there is, of course, going to be a link in the description when I upload the VOD. 2015 and 2016, 10 campaign finance crimes and subsequent cover-ups. These include the campaign finance violations that sent Michael Cohen to prison, wherein the DOJ concluded that Cohen broke the law for an unnamed individual one, who they clarify went on to win the election for president. The statute of limitations expired on all but one of those crimes in 2022. That means we can no longer seek justice for the American people on any of them. One is being investigated at the state level only, but that investigation only exists because the statute of limitations was likely extended due to the subject's continuing absence from the state of New York. Trump. Even so, the deadline to file charges was 2021 on that count, making the case near impossible to be heard in court. We've already let Donald Trump get away with 10 campaign finance violations. All we can do now to preserve our dignity is to put an asterisk next to his presidency whenever we list it in a textbook to clarify that he got to office through illegal means. 2017, 2018, and 2019, 13 instances of obstruction of the Russia and special counsel investigations. The crimes involved include obstruction of justice, witness tampering, making false statements, and criminal violations of the Ethics in Government Act. These are the crimes laid out in the Mueller report, in which Robert Mueller made it clear that there was nothing stopping the DOJ from charging Trump with a crime after he left office. The statute of limitations will expire on half of those crimes in 2024. That's next year, folks. It has already expired on half of those crimes, unless they are considered to be part of a series of continuing wrongs or conspiracy. So again, 13 instances of obstruction of the Russia and special counsel investigations, and half of them we have already let him get away with. However, the investigation closed while Trump was still in office, and there is no indication that Attorney General Merrick Garland has reopened it. 2017 and 2019, 2 charges of making false public financial disclosure reports, including instances where Trump failed to disclose a gift and an asset in his 2019 public financial disclosure report. We use these reports to identify conflicts of interest so that we can keep our politicians honest. The gift took the form of free legal services from Rudy Giuliani, while the asset was the personal loan to his golf course in Scotland. The crime here is making a false statement and a criminal violation of the Ethics in Government Act. The statute of limitations for these crimes expires in 2024. As in, the deadline to file charges is up in 2024, but there is no indication at all that Merrick Garland is working on it. If Garland needs help with this one, I'll show him how to win the case right now. Mr. Trump, did you receive a loan in 2019 for your golf course in Aberdeen, Scotland? Okay. Is this a copy of your 2019 financial disclosure report? The jury will note that the personal loan appears nowhere on the financial disclosure report. The prosecution rests. There. That's how you do it. That is how you try that in court. That is how you get one indictment on this guy. 2017 through 2021, 2 crimes related to willful destruction of presidential records while Trump was in office. According to officials familiar with the actions, hundreds of documents, if not more, were likely torn up, spanning a range of topics, including conversations with foreign leaders. He was destroying documents about conversations with foreign leaders. Those weren't his to destroy. Those are our documents. Reportedly, the problem was particularly acute at the time of the transition to the Biden administration. Although the Trump White House instituted special practices to deal with this shredded records, which included the people around him desperately taping them back together, it is unclear how many records were lost or permanently destroyed through Trump's ripping routine. The documents, which were literally flushed down the toilet, which the public got photographic evidence of this, so we know this is true, those are gone forever. Get any of those staffers under oath and ask them to repeat to the court what they said to the Washington Post. Because the deadline to file charges passed in 2022 for the times Trump destroyed our documents, your documents, my documents, documents we have ownership of, during his first year in office. We cannot charge for that anymore. Literally, too much time passed for us to hold him accountable. And every year that goes by now without charges being filed will result in him getting away with more crimes. 2019, 5 charges for attempting to get Ukraine to interfere in the 2020 election, including bribery, coercion of political activity, misappropriation of federal funds, obstruction of justice, and soliciting unlawful foreign campaign contributions. That is as corrupt as you get. This is the series of crimes that earned Trump his first impeachment and showed Putin that America was so weak that he didn't have to worry about invading one of its allies. It's a low time for the country. The deadline to file charges in this matter, which arguably caused the second invasion of Ukraine, expires in 2024. There has been no investigation into the matter by the DOJ. None. Deadline expires in 2024. 2020, pressuring federal officers to use their official positions for partisan politics. The Office of Special Counsel determined that 13 senior Trump administration officials, including Secretary Pompeo and Acting Secretary Wolf, engaged in willful and repeated violations of the Hatch Act in the lead-up to the 2020 presidential election. OSC determined that Secretary Pompeo and Acting Secretary Wolf's violations originated within the White House, or possibly the Trump campaign or President Trump himself, and that President Trump laid the foundation for these and other Hatch Act violations by refusing to hold officials accountable for even the most flagrant and clear-cut Hatch Act violations. By the way, he violated the Hatch Act himself. If you think it might be difficult for Garland to prove, bear in mind that just days before delivering his speech, and against the advice of senior State Department lawyers, Secretary Pompeo approved a change to the State Department policy that until then had prohibited him and all other political appointees at the State Department from engaging in many partisan political activities, including addressing a political party convention. Under the new policy, the Secretary of State is not restricted from addressing a political party convention when requested by the president. It specifically says that in a new rule that Secretary Pompeo made that senior State Department lawyers said he shouldn't make. Is the State Department's lawyers' job to decide what would be a healthy policy for America? No, they're there to decide what is legal. That's what they advise on. They said, shouldn't do this. He did this. The president is specifically part of that. This should be a layup. Get Pompeo in court and ask him who said he should change that rule. Then let the gavel fall. 2020, 21 charges relating to attempts to steal the 2020 election. The charges include depriving state residents of a fair and impartial election process, interfering with primaries and elections, obstruction of an official proceeding, knowingly making a false statement, perjury, criminal solicitation to commit election fraud, criminal solicitation of a felony, influencing government officials to withhold or alter a record, conspiracy against rights, conspiracy to commit election fraud, conspiracy to defraud, conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging any duties, seditious conspiracy, interference in an election by employees of federal or state governments, coercion of political activity, racketeer, influenced, and corrupt organizations violations. That's a RICO charge. Incite, assist, or aid and comfort of an insurrection, and intentional interference with the performance of election duties. The House January 6th committee did most of Attorney General Garland's work for him. If he's feeling lazy, I presume he can just play what he saw on we all saw on television in front of a judge. Those charges expire within the next 4 years. And most of the charges that expire this year are being investigated in Georgia at the state level. Let's hope Fulton County's district attorney has more guts, knowledge, and willpower than the Attorney General of the United States. 2021 and 2022, 2 charges relating to unlawful possession of government records, including unauthorized possession of national defense information and, once again, obstruction of justice. A special counsel investigation. A special counsel has been assigned to the investigation, although the evidence is blatant and the deadline to file charges is all the way in 2027. 2021 and 2022, profiting off post-election lies through wire fraud. If you'll recall, Trump obtained $250 million in contributions to the Save America PAC off of false claims that the 2020 election was stolen. A grand jury has been looking into this in part, and the deadline for filing charges is 2027. Okay. What's the recap of this? 56 crimes were committed against the American people. We can no longer seek justice for 56 crimes. We can no longer seek justice for 10 campaign finance crimes because the DOJ did nothing while the deadline for filing charges passed, effectively choosing to permit this behavior. We can no longer seek complete justice on 2 charges relating to the destruction of presidential records, which belong to you and me, because the deadline for any time Trump did these crimes in 2017 has passed. This year, the deadline will pass for any instances that occurred in 2018, and each day that goes by without an indictment, we lose the ability to seek justice on more of those crimes. There is no indication that Merrick Garland is investigating any instances of Trump destroying documents while in office. None. No indication. 13 instances of obstruction of the Russia and Special Counsel investigations are not currently being investigated, and the deadline to file charges has passed on half of them. The deadline to file charges, the deadline for 2 charges relating to making false public financial disclosure reports expires next year, and there is no active investigation into the matter. 5 crimes appear to have been committed in attempting to get Ukraine to interfere with the 2020 election. The filing deadline for those charges is next year, and there is no active investigation. That's 32 crimes. It would appear the DOJ, under Merrick Garland, has endorsed through inaction. The remaining 24 crimes relating to attempts to steal the 2020 election, stealing government secrets, and wire fraud are largely being investigated at the state level. I don't feel that Merrick Garland is going to seek justice for the American people. Whether it's because he's unwilling or because he's unable is irrelevant. The fact that failing to punish 32 crimes committed against and in front of the American people has happened. The fact that he has failed to punish 32 crimes committed against and in front of the American people, it's just unacceptable. If you agree with me, you can make Joe Biden aware of your opinion by filling out a White House contact form, which I will link below or in the chat. it would also be of use to get on social media and make your opinion known publicly while tagging Joe Biden as well as your representatives. If you're from Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Pennsylvania, or Wisconsin, tell your state attorney general that you want them to open an investigation into the fake electors. It's been made painfully clear that if we want anything to be done about this, it must happen at a state level. Finally, tell Merrick Garland himself that you have seen his failure to pursue justice on 32 crimes and that you demand he indict Trump immediately or step aside for someone that knows how to build a case. Let me give you my sources and the links for what you can do. Live, folks. Oh, I'm limited to 200. Okay. I'm going to update that description now. All right, description updated. So the short takeaway from this is that we have had a crime spree go unpunished, and we simply can't continue to allow this to happen. We need law and order in the country. We need rule by sane human beings. We need the madmen who are pilfering from us, who are attacking us, who are stealing our money, who are running our country into the ground. We need them to be held accountable just like everybody else is when they break the law. Merrick Garland is not the man for the job. That simple. Let's read some comments. Catherine Wolf says, I recommend the That Dang Dad, How Being a Cop Broke My Brain. Ooh, interesting. And the abolition movement isn't about no cops, just about reorganization of priorities and funds. I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I will look into that because I think that's interesting. I think what we have mostly is a problem with messaging. I think the protesters are right on in their goals, but I think that similar with the Black Lives Matter protests actually, the messaging was not designed to. It wasn't designed to change the minds of people who are on the fence. And unfortunately, we live in a country where most people are on the fence. They see how crazy MAGA is, and they see how brutal the reality is. And yet, when they hear about what left-wingers are trying to do, they hear crazy messages. And they're mostly coming from corporate media. They're mostly coming from MAGA folks and the GOP. And they're coming also from, let's be real, Democrats, corporate Democrats. And what they do is wait for the messaging on the genuine left to be bad, to be unclear, let's just say. They snatch that, and that is what they will play. And that is how they will say, oh, we represented both sides. You see, we played the absolute least clear, most easy to misinterpret message from the left, and so we can say we've represented both sides. It's like if we represented the Trump side by only playing the clip of Rudy Giuliani's flatulence in public hearings. Franny P says, what is the problem with DOJ? Seriously. I can answer that question. I spent Sunday reading all of a book by Ellie Hassig, I think his name is, about why bosses don't get charged. I'm going to make a video about that, but in short, it comes down to this, and the answer is the same. Why is the DOJ dragging its feet? Well, one, if a single juror trying one of these folks in this matter, votes to acquit. You got a deadlocked jury, for example. you essentially have a pass given. Well, what percentage of people in this country are Trump voters? So in the case of a jury, you're going to have to introduce them, many of them, to the actual information for the first time ever. So you can't assume that the jury is going to go in with the same understanding everybody else does. Also, and perhaps more to the point, when Trump says we talk about how Trump is like a mafia guy all the time. Well, here's structurally how he's like a mafia guy. When Trump wants something done, does he ever say it? No. He talks about it publicly. That's actually how he gets away with it, because in court, he didn't say to hang Mike Pence. In court, he simply said, Mike Pence let us down, when he knew that there was a bunch of people there that hated him, that hated Mike Pence. He riles up crowds and he hints at things and he relies on it being understood that you know what he wants. And the problem is that gives him the ability to later on say, I didn't say to do that. So you have to be able to prove his intent without his words. And that's where it becomes difficult. Is it difficult but not but is it impossible? No, it's not impossible. How do you get someone like that? You flip his underlings. That's going to lead us to what you can do. What you can do is get state charges, get state cases going, because let's say the state case goes on this and you go after Donald Trump. You don't get Donald Trump in the state case. You only get the state fake electors. Well, guess what you've got then? You've got a bunch of people in prison who don't like being in prison, who you can then flip on Trump. The state case lets us get some people so we can finally use the police pressure to encourage them to flip on Trump. This will give them the federal case a chance, a pool of people that they can appeal to, a bunch of folks in prison that they can say, hey, you don't like being in prison? You don't like eating your meals off a tray? You don't like that guy sharpening a toothbrush to stick into your guts? Well, you could trade places with your old boss if you tell us the truth for once in your GD life. State cases are the way to go. Also, because we have a cowardly attorney general in the form of Merrick Garland. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to get to editing. I will be back tomorrow. Tomorrow's a 2 for Tuesday. I'm excited for it. I'll see you there. This has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake.